again, your conditioning will come to the surface. So, but those are very confirming experiences, if you will, that override, if you will, the confirmation that we get intellectually from philosophy and so forth, experiential confirmation, taste. This is the ultimate pranama, or evidence, if you will. So we should be encouraged by that and assured, certainly through experience, that what we're pursuing it exists, it's attainable. It's a little elusive, if you will. Krishna's moving from one side to another, telling us to go over here. We get over there, he says, go over here instead, and so on and so forth. But it's all worthwhile, if you will, and those experiences confirm that, as I say, more than anything else. But it takes, the answer is to your question is it takes many, but in one you can break through, which is so both answers apply. Like I've said before, sometimes devotees ask how many lifetimes can I become Krishna conscious in one lifetime, and I say, in one lifetime you can. The question is which one. And the answer, of course, to that is the one in which you're no longer concerned with that, because you're so absorbed in bhakti, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says in his Shikshastakam. He says, Mama janmani janmanishvare bhavatat bhakti arhoitakitoi. I'm not concerned with anything anymore, just bhakti, and it's my only desire, and I'm doing that. And even the concern that was previously there for becoming free from birth and death is no longer a concern for me. In that lifetime. All right, so what else?
Next question is from Vrajahari.
And Vrajahari says, Pranam Maharaj, have you always had the good fortune of practicing bhakti in the association of other devotees? Could you kindly share any guidance for maintaining sadhana in solitude? Thank you.
Well, when I was a member of ISKCON, of course, I was surrounded by devotees, and I had a close group of devotees, brahmacharis, who served with me also. But even in that, I was very much a self-starter, if you will, and a leader by example, and without trying to be a leader, just by my own example, I apparently was able to compel people to follow along enthusiastically. In the context of that, I still spent a lot of time to myself as much as possible. And I would consume myself by hearing and chanting, reading. I was one of the most well-read devotees in all of ISKCON. So they say, and that was what was rumored about me. And I was up to date with every book that Prabhupada wrote, and for example, when the Chaitanya Charitamrita came out, Ramaswar, who was in charge of the publishing, a godbrother of mine, he was sending me advanced copies of Chaitanya Charitamrita. I was probably one of the first persons to ever read the Chaitanya Charitamrita in the Western world. That said, upon leaving ISKCON for the purpose of better serving its ideal, as I understood it from Prabhupada, and that through the further guidance of Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj, I didn't have that same kind of association. Of course, I always had other devotees who, following me and so forth, but contemporaries, peers, more advanced devotees and so forth. That was limited. Some of us left here and there, and we were a loose confederation of sorts, but it was more loose than it was a confederation, I would say. And it developed more in that direction, given our individuality, the members who, Prabhupada's disciples who came under the shelter of Sri Maharaj, they had obviously their own individuality and so forth. And as that developed in terms of their missions and so forth, then the opportunity to associate with peers became even less. And I would say it's even less now. I was just having a conversation with another devotee yesterday, and he asked me that, are there any, who are some of the, devotees? He said from ISKCON, but it extends beyond ISKCON, that you are, God brothers who you're in close contact with. And it's really, I couldn't name any really. And those who have been close at times, or might be in the present, there are some in the present, they're not like peers in a sense. I mean, they're like God brother and God sister followers, if you will, who don't treat me entirely as a peer. They don't. So, or they're not more advanced devotees. So anyway, as time has gone on in my spiritual life and evolution, I've been more in a position to rely upon my own, practice and so forth. And so how do I do that? Which is basically your question. It is, I spend a lot of time reading and thinking about verses, contemplating their meanings, and I write and so forth. So, I have a taste for these things, so I absorb myself in them, whether I'm with anyone or any other associate devotees or not. Without such a taste, without being such a self-starter, if you will, then it's more difficult. Once Pujapachita Maharaj said that if you stay in a group, then the progress will be slow, but it will probably be steady. If you go independent, because you feel the necessity to do so, then you can go much faster, but there's greater risk involved. There's no safety net there, if you will, of God brothers and God sisters to hold you up and serve as they can and often do as a deterrent from your material samskars surfacing and taking precedence. They serve as a like a safety net. So without that, you can go faster, but then there's a risk. He told us that. So I took the risk, but I didn't feel I had an alternative really, and it has been fruitful. But your question is significant, because a good number of my own students who are in a similar position, although they're not like me, and so they don't have the same safety net to the same extent. I mean, they have one another, they communicate, so forth, but they're not. It's not the same kind of safety net, for example, that ISKCON provides, or living in a moth, provides, if you will. And some of them live in places without association, or where the association is not conducive, although it on the surface it's a devotees association. So the question is pertinent, but what that's why we do these talks to once a week to help give support, if you will, and why we publish books and so forth. And I've done a lot, I believe, to try to create a safety net, if you will, or a support system. I have like thousands and thousands of lectures. You will not be able to keep up with them. like I was able to keep up with Prabhupada's lectures and books. It's not possible. I'm so far ahead of you. And the books that I've written are very, they can be read again and again. I read them and I'm surprised at what's in there and how it's been said. And I find it very compelling at times. And I'm not finished with that. So there's a wealth there that I've created of siksha, if you will. And then I try to make myself available as much as possible, given my own personal psychology and the eligibility, if you will, of my students to take advantage of me. I make myself available in consideration of those things. And it's really, so these are things that, while there are periods of solitude, if you will, for maybe a person like in your situation, that you're experiencing that's different than when you were maybe part of a bigger mission or something like that. These are things that gravitate towards, to take advantage of, to connect with, and so forth, that break up the solitude, and especially if you visit with me personally when I do a retreat somewhere, it's very compelling. There you have other association, and the devotees are electrified, and it's shared spontaneously and so forth, and it carries one. So it's really important to, in your solitude, to put aside some time, save whatever it may take to go and participate. And if you can orient your life, is what I would do. I would orient my life in such a way as to be able to go when he goes here, when Gurudev goes there, when Gurudev goes there, as much as possible. Be there. That would be very helpful, very powerful. So I'm doing what I can to create the support for you, and I hope that you'll take advantage of it. Those are some thoughts. I hope it helps.
Thanks, Guru Maharaj. So the next question is from Krishna Kanal.
May I have a follow-up on that? I'm sorry, I can't find where to put my hand up.
You can. What is it?
Well, your great god brother Trana Karta put out a book in the 2022 called O'Hara, and you're on almost every fourth page of how great you were and how you trained and trained and trained and trained and trained and trained, and I mean, it's amazing book. It took me 2 days to read it, and I couldn't put it down. And you came up almost every fourth or fifth or sixth page, Tripurari Maharaj, and all your great training, and you were he praised you as to your stalwartness and your sadhana. I mean, you're probably one of the best, I would say, examples of how to distribute Prabhupada's books and how to keep the Sangha going. So I was very impressed, and I'm glad you accepted me as your disciple. And he also mentioned Manasutta. Manasutta and I were dear friends, and Manasutta recommended you for me.
Well, Trana Karta and Manasutta were certainly friends of mine, and Trana Karta did interview me for his book, so I heard it was much appreciated. I haven't read it myself, but thank you for bringing that up. It's something that devotees can pick up for themselves. O'Hare, I guess it is. O'Hare was the name of the airport. Prabhupada asked me to tell them, suggested they change it to Hare Krishna, which I did, but they didn't.
Yeah, and your story was in there as to what you did and how you did it, and it was so great. I was like, all right, well, Tripurari Maharaj will do it.
That was so good. Thank you for your comment, Bijay. Let's go on to the next question.
I can post a copy of it in the chat.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So the next question's Krishna Kanai.
And Krishna Kanhaya says, Hare Krishna, dear Guru Maharaj. My question is about the numbers 8 and 18 that seem to pop up a lot in Krishna's magic creation. For example, both Radha and Krishna were born on the 8th, though of different months. A lot of prayer poems have 8 verses, ashtakas. There are the 8 main gopis. And then for the number 18, the 18 Puranas, the 18 chapters of the Gita. Do you have any insights on this? Thank you so much.
18,000 verses of the Bhagavatam, 18 syllables to the Gopal mantra. I'm not a numerology person, so I never thought about that. I did some research once on the number 108, and it has cross-cultural significance. I can't. Was quite some time ago, but I found it very interesting. You can probably find some of that on the internet if you look up the significance of the number 108. Yeah, I'll do some research on that myself because it's an interesting topic. Quite a few 8s and 18s, but I'm sorry that I can't. I'm not informed on that enough to give a meaningful reply at this time.
The next question is from Kishore Krishna.
Pranams, Guru Maharaj. Good morning.
Morning to you and your friends.
Thank you. I hope you had a nice Baladev Purnim. So my question's about Krishna's separation from the jiva sadhaka. And I've heard you talk about Sanatana Goswami in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, describe how the jiva swabhav comes out of the will or desire of Krishna. And so it seems like Krishna has some desire or longing from the beginning to have connection with that swabhava, the jiva. And then Srila Sridhar also talks a bit about the loving search for the lost servant in a very kind of poetic way. And basically, I'm wondering if this desire or separation from the jiva on the part of Krishna is like a constant in relation to the swabhav, or if it's like a potential that increases as the jiva realizes more about their swabhav.
Yeah, I think the former is more the case. It's said that Krishna wears a Kastubamani jewel, and that jewel represents all the jivas around his neck or near his heart. So this has been explained somewhere, I believe in a commentary by maybe the Bhagavatam commentary of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, as a way of saying poetically and in reality that all the jivas are very dear to Krishna. There's a classic statement of the Upanishads that portrays Bhagavan and the jiva as two birds in the same tree, the tree being the body. In fact, I'm going to use this metaphor as the cover for the book that we're writing. It's going to be called Birds of the Same Feather. The nature of the self in Gaudiya Vedanta. But in the example, then one bird is the jiva, and he's eating the fruits, and the other bird is God, witnessing and waiting, if you will, wherever the jiva goes, right, from one body to the one tree to the next. I'm not sure how we'll depict that with one bird eating the fruit. Maybe on the back cover, the two birds embraced and flying off together, leaving the body, which is the later development. But that anyway, that picture, if you will, that the Upanishads put forth is indicative also, as is the idea that the Kastula Mani, the jewel, represents all jivas. Krishna wears it over his heart. They both emphasize this point that as you know, it's said that Narayan in Vaikuntha, according to Chaitanya Charitamrita, has a desire to bestow mukti, and as such, corresponding with that desire, there are jivas who are in need of such a bestowal. That's another way to think about that. I think that one could take that same idea and take it from Vaikuntha to Goloka. Different svabhavs, different types of devotees. But it's it's not an insignificant aspect of Krishna's life. We can emphasize that his real life is he's in the arms of Radha and so forth, or who wants to be and needs help to be, and this is his preoccupation and so on and so forth. To humble ourselves, and there's truth to that. We're insignificant, but the nature of Krishna's love extends to to all the jivas without reservation. He kind of wants them to want, if you will. It creates then the facility that may arise and so forth. The section that you refer to that I cite in one of my articles for the forthcoming book is from Brihad Bhagavatamrita, and Sanatana Goswami makes the point that Krishna has an unfathomable will that's deeper than millions of oceans, and that's all we can say about why there are different svabhavas for different devotees. If you want to reason further about it, you can only say, well, he is a taster of bliss, of rasa, and so there are unlimited jivas. Each one has a particular rasa, even though the rasas may be the same for some, they're all unique at the same time, and through them, in conjunction with them, then he is perpetually extending his penchant for being a taster of rasa. So that's why. And then, although they're different, everyone's happy with their rasa because it's who they are. It's what they are. They're svabhav. So I think the former you asked that said, with regard to the latter, obviously, as the devotee begins to turn towards Bhagavan through good association, subsequent spiritual practice, and so forth, then that is extra compelling. But just the fact that he exists and he has such a nature, and that he's now bereft of that, or that he's turned away in the opposite direction from that, as it registers, if you will, with Krishna. But of course, then as you turn and start to become a sadhaka, well, then all the more. I mean, we can just use or refer to examples within the context of our own humanity. If your son turns away, and what can you do? In one sense, he has his own will, but still, how often does the father think of him and wish he would return, and whatever, and so forth? But then when he does return, well, then, it intensifies. But it's not that until he turns, he doesn't care about you, or something like that. Quite the opposite. Does that help?
Yes, very much. Thank you, Guru Maharaj. The picture of your book sounds very beautiful.
Well, thank you. Yeah. It's going to be a nice one. Nice book. Okay, what else?
There's a follow-up to this, Guru Maharaj, from Braj Sundari, who says, so it practically makes brahma-sayujya impossible, or Krishna would end up longing forever for the relationship with that jiva.
Well, what can you do if your son dies, Given the analogy that I was just citing. And we consider brahma-sayujya to be like spiritual suicide. Again, if Krishna wants the jiva to want, then the two wills are there. Krishna's will is in place, but it's not overriding the will of the jiva. So if the jiva is bent on something other than direct devotional service, still, in the case of brahma-sayujya, while we call it spiritual suicide, still it is a form of liberation. It is a union of sorts with Brahman, with the absolute, and something's better than nothing, I guess you could say. Then again, well, we do have the statement of Sanatana Goswami and Rupa Goswami also, and others, that even those who are liberated, and they're referring to those who have entered into brahma-sayujya, by Krishna's grace, I think it is said, can also develop in terms of their svabhav and come out of that situation. That's one argument. The other argument, other side, within Gaudiya Vaishnava, some acharyas say this brahma-sayujya, it can endure. Bhaktivinoda makes that point. Prabhupada makes that point. If you turn to the Ramanuja Sampradaya, they'll make a similar point. It's because it's not a full liberation. It's not full emancipation. And there are different schools, two different schools in Ramanuja Sampradaya that look at this slightly differently. If you go to some of the other Sampradayas, Vaishnava Sampradayas, they discount that altogether. But when we acknowledge it, and to some extent, comparatively compared to other sampradayas. So those are some thoughts on that. But I don't think that your question, your doubt holds, in that, as I said, well, if Krishna desires, then they can come out of brahma-sayujya and attain a bhakti swarup. So it's up to him. He may think, oh, they've turned away from me. They're not interested in serving me. They just want to get away from material life. All right, we'll put him there forever. Maybe I'll change my mind, bring him back, bring him to me. That's who can understand the will of Krishna. So, but I don't think it holds that he's lamenting for them forever. Some measure of lament may be there, but whether it's enough to compel him to do something about it is another thing. The same thing is there We say Brahmanda Brahmite Kon Bhagavan Jiva Guru Krishna Prasade Bhaya Bhakti Lata Beach. So the jiva, how long has the jiva been in material existence? Well, forever. How long is that? I mean, so, and then at some point, as this Bengali verse I just cited from Chaitanya Charitamrita says, they become fortunate, and by the grace of Krishna, they get a guru. By the grace of the guru, subsequently they get Krishna. So what's the difference between forever being in material existence until the point that Krishna sends a guru? You get you on your list, he's got a big list of every jiva, which is there's no end to. What's the difference between that and being brahma-sayujya? That's forever too, right? And at some point, Krishna decides to bring them out, which is tantamount to what he does in material existence by bringing them in touch with making them lucky. Bhagya means fortunate. It means causeless, which means it's not a product. Acquiring attaining sadhu sangha and a guru is not a product of karma. It's not a cause and effect type of thing. It's a grace. When that happens, when's that going to happen for the trees outside of my window? I guess it's happening to some extent now. They're here, and the place has been turned into a holy place and so forth. So anyway, those are some thoughts. What else?
The next question is from Gyanesh.
And Gyanesh asks, he says, Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandavat pranams. I had a question about vatsalya-rati with respect to Sri Radha. I was wondering if there are any sects of Vaishnavism that emphasize this aspect of worship of Sri Radha as a daughter, and whether it is proper for a sadhaka to pursue this interest. Thank you.
I'm not sure what you mean by that. Would it be a good idea, if this is what you mean, to pursue a role in Krishna Lila in which which is that of vatsalya? That's basically seems to be the question. And if in the case that one attains vatsalya rasa in Goloka, and this is your ideal, then obviously you would look at Krishna, Radha, and all of the boys and girls as sons and daughters. Mother Yasoda looks at every boy as her son, every daughter as her daughter. And the same would hold true for Kirtida or Nanda Maharaj or Rishabhanu Maharaj. These are the two main families, right? Rishabhanu Raj, his area, and Nandagram, and so forth. So these are the prominent examples, those and Rohini of Vatsalya Bhav. You have some Vatsalya Bhav in Purnamasi mixed with Sakya. So there are paradigmatic figures that exemplify that ideal, and if I understand your question correctly, maybe without thinking about it, what you're saying is, why, narrow the focus. That is it acceptable, let's say, or possible to think that I would have a vatsalya relationship with Radharani, where she's like my daughter? Well, that would be the case again, for anybody in vatsalya bhav in Braj would think like that. So it's just, the question seems to be, if properly understood, is vatsalya bhav a noble ideal? Certainly it is. That said, I think that the prominent bhavas or rasas that we find in Gaudiya Vaishnavism are obviously Madhurya rasa, a particular kind of Madhurya rasa, and Sakya rasa. Given that the founding gurus, if you will, the samasti, the macrocosmic gurus of the sampradaya are Gaur and Nityananda, who are tasting those rasas. Krishna, Gaur, Brajendananda, and Krishna, coming as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He was a lover, and primarily in pursuit of and relishing Madhurya rasa, and Balaram, who's Nityananda Prabhu, who was relishing primarily Sakya rasa in relation to Krishna. Given that, there's a lot of facilities, tools, commentaries, songs, and so on and so forth that manifest in the sampradaya that facilitate that are useful. Of course, Madhurya rasa doesn't appear in a vacuum, and so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes to bestow bhakti according to the swabhava of each individual devotee, and in particular to recruit from all, you can say from Dasya, Sakya, and Vatsalya, as well as Madhurya, and as much as the former three facilitate the latter, which again doesn't appear in a vacuum. And of course, beyond that as well, because he's in the role of the Yuga avatar, he's also his mission is very capable of facilitating, promoting, the development of other bhavs like Ram Bhakti and so forth. And we see that, examples of that in Chaitanya Charitamrita, in Chaitanya Bhagavat. So, as I've often said, there's the breadth and there's the depth of the sampradaya. And I think if you look at the depth of the sampradaya, you look more at the focus of Sakya rasa and Madhurya rasa in particular. Its focus, and thus facilitating that more, but in an extended sense, all the bhavs of Braj plus, of Vaikuntha. But with regard to the latter, whether it be Vatsalya, or for example, in Braj, or it be Ram Bhakti, or Bhakti for Narayan, and so forth, there are other sampradayas that were blessed, for example, by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that focused to a greater extent on such. For example, with regard to Vatsalya rasa, that there's a focus of this in the Vallabha Sampradaya, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave the blessing to Vallabha for his Sampradaya. According to the Vallabha Sampradaya, the jivas have a fixed swabhav, and which is the will of Krishna, and it's realized accordingly. So, and then with regard to Ram Bhakti, let's say, there are other sampradayas of Vaikuntha Bhakti. So I have seen devotees collected up from samsara by the Gaudiya Sampradaya, and then become situated in their practice, and eventually they gravitate towards Vatsalya Bhava, or towards, let's say, Bhava of Aishvarya in Vaikuntha, and then they develop a rapport with members of Sampradayas. There's a famous, what's his name? The famous scholar who was brought in by Gaudiya Vaishnavas and then ended up getting initiated in the Vallabha Sampradaya. Haberman, Mr. Haberman, I forget his first name. And he did a translation of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. I know of other devotees who've also gravitated towards eventually the facility that's there in the, if you will, in terms of the songs and practices and so forth, For example, towards the Vallabha Sampradaya, for example, the Vallabha Sampradaya, it's typical you get a deity at the time of initiation to worship in your house, and he's typically worshipped in vatsalya-rati. And I've seen others go to the Ramanuja Sampradaya and so forth, with all respect for the Gaudiya Sampradaya through which they got involved. So this is the breadth and the depth. So, but vatsalya-rati is certainly extremely exalted and a noble and high ideal. And anyone in that bhav in Braj will see Radharani as their daughter. I mean, I hope I understood your question. But based on my understanding of it, that's my answer. Hope that helps.
The next question is from Gunjan Sharma.
And Gunjan says, Dear Guru Maharaj, Dandavat Pranam. Krishna has so many beautiful names. Out of those, which is the favorite of Srimati Radharani? Thank you.
Well, I'll give a broader answer. It said in some places that the favorite name of Nanda's son in Braj is Hari, because it means that it calls him a thief who has taken away, who has stolen their hearts. That Hari, I can't stand him. What has he done? He's ruined my life. So otherwise, I've never seen it published anywhere what Radharani's favorite name for Krishna is. She has names that have never been heard before. Some of his friends have such names too that you would be shocked to hear how they refer to him, and they're very endearing to him, but they're not put in print. The names that are put in print should be emphasized. They have the virtue and the power, and they have been disseminated to take us there, where we can find other names that are not publishable. We find a hint of that, for example, in Sakyabhav in Bhagavad Gita, where Arjuna says, Hey Yadava, hey, what does he say? Hey Yadava, hey.
Hey Krishna, hey Saketi.
Hey Krishna, hey Yadava, hey Saketi. And he properly understood he's speaking of Krishna with reference to these names in a derogatory way. And I called you by these names, and the implication of the way I was using them was that I was deprecating you and putting myself, in a better position. Who are you? You are here. I'm Arjuna. I'm the gurus and so forth. Or whatever. Anyway, so and then of course he laments that now because the Aishvarya of Krishna's manifesting in the 11th canto, and he sees so that you're actually God. But there's a hint of these names within Sakyarasa that are names that are making fun of him or accusing him of something. And I'm sure Radharani has similar names for him. Whether they're the most dear names that who can say. So that's my answer. Hari.
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 The next question is from Braj Balabi.
And Braja Balabi says, My Dandavats Maharaj, did you have the opportunity to personally meet Srila Gaura Govinda Swami? If so, would you be willing to share something about him and your experience?
Okay, Braj Balabi from where?
Poland, I believe.
From Poland, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, of course, I knew Govinda Maharaj. When I came out of the shelter of Sri Maharaj, Govinda Maharaj was more or less residing at the Math as a householder.
I think the question was about Gaur Govinda Maharaj.
Oh, Gaur Govinda Maharaj? Not Bhakti Sundar Govinda Maharaj.
No, Gaur Govinda Maharaj,
Oh, I'm
the
sorry.
Prabhupada disciple.
Gaur Govinda Maharaj. Yes, I knew Gaur Govinda Maharaj. Gaur Govinda Maharaj liked me very much. And we took sannyas at the same time, 1975, just after the opening of the Krishna Balaram temple. So we had a link like that, if you will, and from Prabhupada, of course. And Gaur Govinda Maharaj was learned, and he was very much tuned into Prabhupada's desire for the dissemination of Krishna consciousness. Although his ideal was Madhurya Rasa, I believe in the temple in Bhubaneswar that he eventually helped to develop for Prabhupada. Krishna and Balaram deities were installed there, I believe. But he, in the context of his service, he's from Orissa, so he was stationed, if you will, I believe in Bhubaneswar, just outside of Jagannath Puri, and he was very intent on doing translations and publishing Prabhupada's works and books. So he was tuned into this desire of Prabhupada to see his books circulated and so forth. And of course, I was as well, not as a translator, but as a circulator and a distributor of his books in English. And I, of course, became very well known for that, recognized by Prabhupada and, blessed and so on and so forth. And so because there was a connection in the ways that I'm describing, when we would meet in Mayapur annually, he was always anxious to meet me and so forth. And it was, like I say, based on, here's this person who's so involved in book distribution. I'm doing the same thing in another way, and this is Prabhupada's desire. And so we had a natural connection in that way. But that said, of course, he was stationed in Bhubaneswar, and I was traveling in English-speaking countries largely. And so we didn't have much opportunity to associate, but we would during the Mayapur festival. Briefly, I didn't have the chance to enter into his world, if you will, of what was going on in Bhubaneswar. I went to Puri a couple of times. I never went to the Bhubaneswar temple. He joined after me, and I had my service. But there was a point in ISKCON where he was in some implicit conflict with the governing body, and it had to do with initiations and succession and so forth. And so he was kind of a natural figure that the devotees of ISKCON seem to gravitate towards, given his depth of feeling for Krishna consciousness, as opposed to those who had been appointed, or those who the appointed, and so forth. And they didn't extend Prabhupada named some persons to initiate. He was thinking who was here, who was representing him in this part of the world. And he was thinking of his members of the GBC largely. And he said, so-and-so can do so here, so-and-so can do there. And then he said, if others are needed from the sannyasis, it can be extended and so forth. But the governing body was reluctant to extend that to Gaur Govinda Swami, because he just wasn't one of them. That's kind of the way I looked at it. He had his own thinking, and it was highly spiritual and so forth. So anyway, there was some implicit kind of conflict that ultimately forced him to make a decision. Should he leave ISKCON? Prabhupada told him to always stay in ISKCON. And so he wanted to, honor that and so forth. But then I think as a result, he passed away from the world rather than proceed, further into what was becoming a conflict for him. But before that happened, and after I had left ISKCON, then I met with him a couple of times. One time he was in the United States, and he came to my temple. I had a temple in just north of California, and he came there and visited the darshan of Bornatai deities that are here now. And I spent several hours chatting and so forth. And he mentioned it to Srimati Radharani, very happy here. And then another occasion when this tension that he was experiencing with the governing body of ISKCON was becoming acute. That was in 1995. I had been outside of ISKCON for 10 years by that time, 1995. And it so happened that some of the leading members of ISKCON at that time had formed a relationship with Narayan Maharaj, and that became a controversy within ISKCON. But they had invited me to come to Mayapur to help them to preach to the GBC that it was the idea that it was certainly bona fide to have a Siksha Guru, even if he wasn't a member of ISKCON, which they had mandated was not allowable, which is what I had done, and which they were implicitly doing in relation to Narayan Maharaj. So I had been invited there by them, some GBC members, and they were going to preach to the GBC, but they ultimately backed down. But anyway, at that time, Guru Govinda Maharaj was there, and he was a bit of an issue too. And I spoke with him about the possibility of leaving ISKCON and so forth, and so on. I've read some of his talks that have been transcribed into books and so forth. But he would have been, I think, a good. He within ISKCON, he set an example and created enthusiasm in devotees in a natural way that should have made him an obvious successor, maybe not the sole successor, but a natural successor to Prabhupada, who could have helped the devotees go boil the milk, so to speak. He was involved in boiling the milk, if you will, to use Prabhupada's adage or analogy. And it's unfortunate that didn't happen. Prabhupada, his main instruction was look for a self-effulgent charges. So he had a bit of a self-effulgence, if you will, that attracted devotees without being officially appointed and having a bumper sticker for him as a guru and so forth. So it was a pity. It was a failure on the part of ISKCON, I believe, to recognize him. They do after he passes away and celebrate him, but they didn't sufficiently during his presence, and that's unfortunate. So I'm sorry, can't say more, but I know things about him. I know some of the stories about him that aren't true, that have been promoted by a godbrother of mine named Bhagavad Maharaj, who was quite a storyteller, but there's not a lot of truth to the stories. In case you've read any of some of those, but nevertheless, some thoughts. Thank you for asking. Guru Govinda Maharaj Ki Jai.
So just to the previous question, Shraddha just mentioned that she had heard in a song that a favorite name of Srimati Radharani is Khan.
Well, yeah, that's a very intimate name, Khan.
And then the next question is from Nam Bhajan.
Nam Bhajan.
Suddenly, I can't hear you.
Oh,
sorry.
Now I can.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah,
Start
sorry.
again.
Nam Bhajan in Colombia. He says, Pranam Gurudev. Srila Prabhupada spoke of boiling the milk, as you've just mentioned. It seems common to find interpretations of this expression that focus on supporting the approach of elevated topics while neglecting apparently simple matters. It also seems common that some avoid the service of preaching or sharing with others about Krishna, taking shelter of this expression. How do you understand the meaning of boiling the milk nowadays? Thank you.
Well, I don't think the two are mutually exclusive, sharing and boiling the milk. The analogy of boiling the milk, implicit within it, is that the milk will overflow. You keep boiling it, it will overflow. So the idea is to absorb oneself in practice. And if one is doing so, and appropriately, then naturally they're going to develop, prior, I would say, to bhava bhakti, they're going to develop a natural compassion. They're going to be experiencing a taste consistently. Their intelligence, their logic will be fixed. They'll develop a taste, and so forth. By deep practice, and that doesn't mean to neglect certain things. It means to be attentive and magnify small things and see how big they actually are. With regard to practices, I mean, it doesn't mean, well, now I'm a rock bhakta, so I don't need to put on tilak or something like that. I mean, if that could be an example of something, the value of that, the significance of that would be magnified. But the compassion arising would make one naturally inclined to share, depending on the circumstances and so forth, what opportunities one has to share. There's I guess there's two extremes. The one extreme is like you create all types of ways to spread Krishna consciousness that incorporate other things in, make it seem cool. We like rock music too, or we like rock, whatever the very latest music is. And we do it too, Hare Krishna, that kind of stuff. That's like an extreme on the other side. And there's the other extreme of so-called focusing entirely on Manjari Bhav or whatever, without having the early adhikar, to do so. And both become, let's say, unbecoming. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive. And when they start to become mutually exclusive, that's when, in someone's eyes, that's probably when they become problematic. And let's say, for example, you want to boil the milk and study the scriptures and chant more and so on and so forth. Then a way in which someone might do that and still share would be to write, for example. Just like every now and then I go on Facebook and I post something that I feel, that I think, that I read, that's significant to me, that that's how I use that, if at all. And so there's an example. The milk's overflowing here. I'm going to say this to somebody. I'm going to tell this to somebody else. This is just too nice of an insight. Or I saw this poem here, and this is what it meant to me, and let me put it there, or this thought, and so forth. So I think that's a natural kind of result, and I don't think one can just turn around and decide, oh, I'm just going to do bhajan today. It's a development that comes out of cleansing the heart, and the sharing is a good way to cleanse the heart. What you speak about is what you tend to think about. And hearing is said to be solidified by chanting about it, by repeating it, and so forth. So I want to kind of blur the lines between outreach and boiling the milk and kind of speak as I am, how the two are not mutually exclusive. They go together. Those are my thoughts on that. I mean, there's also, for example, you take my own circumstances. I'm doing outreach, but it's largely, almost exclusively to devotees who are already initiated and sharing, rather than going out and telling someone about reincarnation, which is a good thing to do. But so there's the deeper you go, I don't think it's the less you share. It's maybe the context in which you will share will be altered, but it will continue to go on. Hope that helps.
Wonderful, Guru Maharaj. We're past to past. I don't know if you'd like to take another one, Guru Maharaj. We've got quite a number of questions, but we can obviously save to next week.
No, I think I'm running a little late on my schedule this morning, so I think I'll stop here, and then we'll get together again next week. Or Bhaktivinoda ki jai.
Srila Guru Maharaj ki jai. So yeah, thanks everybody, and as always, the questions are next on the list. You'll be first next week, and do feel free to let us know, and we'll through the week, and we'll add them. Haribol.
Haribol, Gauranga.